Hi, let's talk about variables and data types. In this lesson, we will be talking about variables and data types in Python. Variables are a way to store data, and data types, on the other hand, define the kind of data that can be stored in a variable. The data stored in a variable can be of different types, such as numbers, strings of characters, or lists. When you execute your Python program, the operating system, be it Windows, macOS, or another, assigns a specific memory space for your application. It's within this space that we store variable data. To create a variable, you give it a name. This is how we name a memory location, and assigns it a value. This is how we store a value in that named memory location. In short, a variable has three parts: the variable name, the assignment operator, and the variable value. This whole thing is called a variable. The name of a variable can be any combination of letters, numbers, and underscores, but it cannot start with a number. For example, the following code creates two variables, a and username, which are valid variable names. The variable a stores the number 10, and the variable username stores the name John. So how about the data types? Data types defines the kind of data or the type of data that can be stored in a variable. The following are the basic data types in Python. Integers are whole numbers such as 1, 10, or -100. Floats are decimal point or floating point numbers such as 3.142, 1.2, 1.3, and so forth. Strings are sequence of characters such as hello world. This is a string. Last but not least, booleans can be either true or false. Let's open PyCharm and explore how to create a variable and the different kinds of data we can store in a variable. I'm gonna go ahead and create a folder on my desktop. I'll call this folder Python lessons. So then quickly here open PyCharm. But if you're using any code editor, that's still fine. But I'll be using PyCharm for these lessons. If you have opened projects before, then we'll see a list of projects here. But if you haven't, then it will be a different screen. But let me show you the screen that you'll see when you don't have any previous project. Let me remove this one. So usually you'll see this if you haven't created any project before. So let's go ahead and create new project. Let's utilize this folder that we just created. Click and open that folder. And then, what you'll see here is this is the location for our project in the desktop. Then also our virtual environment is in the same location, but with an extra folder of venv. Our virtual environment is just an isolated workspace for our development. Right now we won't activate it, but as we go on, we'll get to learn more about it and use it. So the last part here that is important is to make sure that this create a main.py is checked so that the main.py is auto created for you. So let's go ahead and create the project. Once it's open, let's delete all this and close this as well. So this is your virtual environment folder, and also this is your main.py, the folder that was created, and this is the main folder that you'll be working on or where you'll be writing our Python code. Let's jump right into it. Let's start off with how do we name our variables. We have established that variables are a way of storing data. So now let's understand how do we name these variables. The first rule is variable cannot start with a number. So if you say age equals to 21, this is invalid and it will generate an error on your code. So you can't start with a number, but if you remove that, then this is valid. One thing that we have also talked about is variable consists of three parts: the variable name, the assignment operator, and also the variable value. These three components makes what we call it a variable. This name, how we name it, firstly we talked about you can't start with a number. The second part is this can be any letter between A to Z. Let's write a comment here so that it's clear. So this is how you write a comment in Python. You put in the hashtag and you put in a comment. So we are saying that Python variables can be any letter between A to Z, and also can be any capital letters between A to Z and underscore. So if we say age underscore, this is a valid variable name. It can even start with underscore, but it can start with a number. Then also this variable, we cannot have special characters like, your $sign or your hashtag symbols and all that. These are invalid. When you name a variable, look at this: A to Z and underscore. That's how you name your variable. And also your variable name should be descriptive, right? So let's say here we want to create a program that will help the user to register in a fitness app, for instance. Let's say we are looking for age, height from the user. Let's say username, and let's say we ask the user if they are a premium member, right? Let's go ahead and write variables so that we store data in these variables. So start with age. Age equals to let's say 21, right? You can say 21, any number, 87, right? The one thing that we also talked about are data types. So any number that is a whole number, we call this data type an integer. So which means it's just 100, even, negative numbers. These are integers. So the second one, let's talk about height. Height is a decimal point or floating point number. So you're going to need a little bit of different type to store this data. So you can say height is 1.87 meters. So this is what? Floats. Any number that has a floating point or a decimal point here, we call the type of data a floating point or a float. The third one here, let's ask for username, or let's store username. Username can be John, for instance, and we can either use single quotes or double quotes, and we call this type of data a string. And the last one is premium. Here we have two options. You can either put true or false. We call this boolean. One thing that we have to understand is whenever we want to use these values, for whatever reason, then we are going to reference these values. John, we're going to use username to reference John, or age to reference 87. What I mean is, to demonstrate this, there is a utility or function called print. So we'll get to a function later in this course, but this helps us to display information on the console. For example, if you want to print age, or if you want to print 87, you don't write 87, but you write age. Then when you run this, then you'll see age being printed here. So let's say, for instance, how about when you want to print username? Same applies. John is printed here. This can be useful. Let's say you want to welcome your user when they visit your website. You can write welcome. You see, this has to be in double quotes or single quotes. It doesn't really matter. But as long as it's in quotes, then put a comma, then put username. Then you can display welcome John. This was the introduction to data types and variables. You'll get to see more of them as we progress with the course. In summary, in this lesson, we learned about variables and data types in Python. Variables are used to store data in a program, and data types define the kind of data that can be stored in a variable. There are many different data types in Python, but the most common ones are integers, floats, strings, and booleans. So we'll cover other types as we proceed with the course. See you in the next one.